Everybody, we're going to go ahead and get started. We have a great meeting for you today. Supervisor Stephanie Moulton-Peters will be speaking with us. We're really excited about that. This meeting has been planned and put together by the Transportation, Land Use, and Housing Committee. I'm going to begin by reading our land acknowledgement. The League of Women Voters of Marin County lives and meets on the ancestral traditional lands of the Coast Miwok people. We acknowledge and honor the Coast Miwok Nation and are grateful for the present-day community of the federally recognized tribe, the Federated Indians of the Great and Rancho region, comprised of direct descendants of Coast Miwok. We also acknowledge other contemporary Indigenous groups who live and work in Marin. We acknowledge the deep harm done by settler colonialism through religious and governmental groups and individuals. They attempted to erase the Coast Miwok and other Indigenous nations by stealing their land, violating tribal sovereignty, and destroying their culture. We also acknowledge our own loss of the wisdom of the land and water protectors as we now face the disruption of thousands of years of good stewardship of this land. We commit to creating a culture of honor. We respect the enduring relationship that exists between Coast Miwok and Indigenous peoples and the traditional territories. We strive to be good guests of the Coast Miwok people as we live side by side in this paradise we now call Marin County. And I believe I read the long version instead of the short version, but it's good to do that now and again. So before we get started, are there any announcements that people want to make? Anybody? Anything coming up? Anything you want to share with us? Okay, well, it is my pleasure to introduce our new president, Kevin Hadgett, who is also the chair of the Transportation, Land Use, and Housing Committee. We're just delighted that he has put together this great program, he and the committee, and delighted to have Kevin taking over leadership of our league. So thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Ann. Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge the great work that Ann's done certainly in the last 2 years and even beyond that. So Ann, thank you very much. I'm looking forward to working with you and your guidance as I proceed in my new role. I'm very pleased this morning to be able to present Stephanie Moulton-Peters. Stephanie is the Marin County Supervisor for District 3, which includes Sausalito, the Floating Homes, Marin City, Tam Valley, Almonte, Mill Valley, Altros, Sutton, Manor, Strawberry, Tiburon, and Belvedere. Stephanie serves on several local and regional boards, including the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, the Bay Conservation and Development Commission, the Golden Gate Bridge, Highway and Transportation District, the Transportation Authority of Marin, in which she is a past chair, and is currently chair of the Marin County City Sea Level Rise Collaborative. Bay Wave. She also serves on the Marin Housing Authority, Marin Flood and Water Conservation District, along with other commissions, boards, and subcommittees. Wow, that's a tremendous amount. Prior to being elected supervisor, Stephanie served 3 terms on the Mill Valley City Council and as mayor in 2010, 2014, and lastly in 2018. Stephanie is a graduate of Stanford University's program in human biology with a concentration in environmental policy. Would you please welcome Supervisor Stephanie Moulton-Peters?
Good morning. Thank you, Kevin, and congratulations on taking the helm. And Ann, thank you so much for all you've done the last couple of years as president. I was hearing earlier, we were talking about membership, and I'm counting this is my 40th year in the League of Women Voters. So Sue, I'm catching up. But anyway, it's really been a pleasure to be part of the league and then to go into elected office and work with the league's values and principles very much. So I want to say good morning to everyone. You have recently had a marvelous panel that the league also produced on June 22nd of this year on planning for housing. I reviewed it last week and it was really a fabulous and very information rich panel with our planning director, Sarah Jones, and attorney consultant, Barbara Counts. And I'm saying this because I'm not going to go into those nuts and bolts at all. I'm going to leave that for the greater minds who really understand the laws and regulations. What I want to do today is give you an elected official's perspective on housing and transportation and the related issues. I'm going to keep it high level. I welcome your questions at the end on any of those topics. And so if we could get up the slide deck that we have, I'll go ahead and work from that. Thank you to my aide, Jennifer Mbimbo, who's here with me today, and also to the Transportation Authority of Marin, who helped me put together these slides. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. And again, it's summer. We're going to be very informal. Yes, Marin County Planning Framework. So those of you who have been following the current housing element development, as I know many of you have, were probably also with us in years past for perhaps some of you for the 1973 countywide plan, which I'll talk about in a minute, for the 2007 major renovation of that plan, which followed, and then now more recently to the 2023 countywide plan that we've just completed. What I want to point out is what marvelous framework documents these plans are for the work that we're doing in housing and transportation and sea level rise. But for today, I'm going to focus on housing in particular and transportation. And the 73 plan, you will recall, and we can go to the next slide, came about during the time that there were large proposed freeway corridors and large developments the size of small towns and communities planned for Marin and West Marin and parts of northern Marin as well. In response to the threat of overdevelopment at that time, this general plan was really a landmark plan that set out 3 environmental corridors, which you may be able to make out here. But the corridors were the city-centered corridor on the left side of the screen on the bay side with Highway 101 coming up the spine. Then you had the inland rural corridors, which comprise West Marin, ranching and agricultural communities. And then finally to the west was the coastal recreation community. And this framework was really an amazing way to frame and put guardrails on where development would occur. We set the tone for a lot of Bay Area communities who followed suit after us. And it's been an amazing success for Marin County in many ways. Let's go to the next slide. So I mentioned the 2007 countywide plan, and I thought it was great when our community development agency director, Sarah Jones, pointed out this slide that was on the cover of the 2007 plan. That was a very comprehensive update to the earlier plans. And here we have the picture, as she noticed, with the area where Marin would have been developed, but it wasn't. And we have the pristine headlands and GGNRA that we enjoy so much today. But north of that area is really where our planning challenges begin and are fleshed out. So let's go to the next slide and look at, in 2007, if you'll look at the slide on the right, you'll see that what the new purple area that was added for the Baylands Protection Corridor. This is our wetlands corridor along our Bay Coast that was identified and added to become the 4th of the environmental corridors in Marin County. And then the challenge then is to maintain these environmental corridors and the natural resources and open space that they protect, while at the same time in 2023, our challenge is introducing compact development into the city center corridor along 101, along the Smart Line, and in other areas where it has been designated for development. But I want to start us all with, we have a very strong framework to work from and to build on. And this is what I find the most important thing to communicate today, frankly, is that we do have this framework. And though the housing element and all of the detail work and sites identification that it required and dealing with the RENA numbers, which are huge, there's no doubt about it. And I would frankly be surprised if any jurisdiction met their RENA numbers in the next 8 years, including Marin County, but frankly, all over California, the numbers are so large. But be that as it may, we have a framework to work within, and that is one of our strongest assets going forward. Now, the challenge we have in 2023 is not designating the large swaths of land and open space and resources. That has been done. Our challenge is largely infill development in appropriate locations that emphasizes compact development, which means generally multifamily, for the sites on the site list that the county identified for our unincorporated area, which is what I'm mainly focused on today. But I do hope that we have a plan that we can work in tandem with our city and town partners over the next 8 years to create the housing that we need. I think, as this group in particular is aware, the housing is costly. There's not much of it available. It's causing a lot of problem for many people living here now who are worried about staying in the county, or who no longer can afford to stay in the county and must travel many miles a day to come to work in Marin County. Let's do the next slide. Some of the things that we have focused on, and again, our presenters went into greater detail in June, but we are looking at currently at fostering the development of ADUs and facilitating their cost-effective construction in appropriate locations. And not all locations, including high hazard zones, may be appropriate for ADUs or for other building, but for where they fit, they are a good strategy for us to pursue, and we are doing this. There is the new county MCOE JPA that you may have heard of that was recently approved by MCOE, County Office of Education, and the Board of Supervisors to develop multifamily housing on the property at Oak Hill out by San Quentin, a former state surplus property, where we will build the worker and teacher housing. But we created the JPA with the kind of flexibility that if school districts and cities would like to become part of it and benefit from some of the benefits of scale and organization that it will provide, other agencies can bring their own surplus properties under this auspices to develop them for workforce and teacher housing as well. The county is pursuing community land trusts, which were developed successfully on our West Marin area. I hope to bring this concept to a Marin County land trust, where we can bring properties from throughout East Marin into a land trust that would be able to purchase them, save them, and offer affordable housing perpetuity. And then finally, a concept that I was introduced to recently that appears in the 2007 countywide plan is called the transfer of development rights. And this is a concept that was applied once out in West Marin to the LaFranchi Ranch, where they were able to transfer the development rights from one parcel they owned to another parcel, which left the first parcel open space and with a single family development, I believe, but allowed for multifamily development on the other parcel they owned. If we were to use this kind of transfer of development right concept, we could encourage growth in the city center corridor and away from our narrow canyons and steep hillsides by creating a funding bank that, much the way MALT funds agricultural easements. This would fund the transfer of development rights for multiple homes on one site. Those rights could go into a housing bank and be used to create housing in our transit-friendly development areas along the 101 corridor, along SMART, and in the areas where we want to encourage growth. So I see this as a concept I wanted to reintroduce to everyone because I think it could have some real utility going forward. It needs more study, but it is something that the county identified in its 2007 plan. I'm going to shift now and move to transportation. But as I transition, I want to say something about compact development, otherwise known as density. But compact development is not a new concept for Marin County or for California in general. In Marin, we had our small towns that were linked by rail with the Northwestern Pacific Railway, and the towns were known as the jewels on the necklace. And we see that still in the downtown, historical downtowns of all of our Marin cities and towns that have more compact, walkable housing close to the old train depots. And people like very much the feel of those downtown areas. And so when I think of more compact housing, our downtowns are what I'm thinking about. And again, encouraging this kind of development along our city center corridor and along the SMART rail line, including a new station that in the future we might put in the St. Vincent's area where there is a station location that's never been enacted, but it sits there and could come into play at some point in the future. Later in our history, or in the 30s and the 40s, we also had compact development because of economic times, because of the war, but it was something that I noticed when I went precinct walking in Sausalito, how many ADUs and granny units were created during the war years in the backyards of homes in Sausalito at that time for people working in the Marin ship factories and just families living together and welcoming other people into small homes in their backyard. So none of this is new. It's time for us to step up and do these kinds of housing arrangements again, and I think we can do it. Let's move to the next slide now on transportation. And I will just say, as an update, the Marin County recently won an award for our North-South Greenway and this new connector bridge, which runs along over Corte Madera Creek on the way to the Larkspur Ferry area. You can see one of our marvelous residents in her pedicab. Active transportation is a mode of transit that we hope more people will use for the trips that it makes sense. But anyway, this was a big project. You can see it running along Highway 101 as you go north towards San Rafael. And we did win an award, so shout out to the TAM staff. And next slide, please. I think I'm going to skip this one on overall work plan highlights. I want to touch just very briefly on the Highway 37 partnership because it's been in the news. But I also want to note that the four North Bay transportation agencies are working together to widen on an interim basis this very important transportation corridor, and then in the long term, elevate it as a causeway. And why are we doing this? And why is it a focal point? Well, one, there's a sea level rise component where it does flood in many places, including Novato, as we know, on a regular basis. but also as importantly, because so much of our current Marin County workforce comes from Solano County in Vallejo and other cities and towns. So as this group certainly knows, we are importing a lot of our workforce. They spend easily 90 minutes or more each way on this roadway, and it really needs to be upgraded both for the users and for sea level rise. Just briefly touching on the project in Marin County, where we hope to elevate the segment of the highway running from the Nevada 101 interchange to Atherton Avenue. You see, if you look here, that it would also at some point integrate the smart tracks or the freight tracks that run to the west of the highway now. Those will probably move east at some iteration. There is an environmental report that is coming out this August for comment, so you can watch for that. But this is again part of a midterm and long-term plan to address this highway corridor. I want to show briefly some flood protection projects we're doing in Marin City to make the housing and the access in Marin City more accessible during our heavy winter storms. There's a lot of detail on this slide, but I'll move us around starting at the bottom from number 1. We are currently working with the Gateway Shopping Center to install a portable pump at the corner of Drake and Donahue Avenue, which would pump water from the pond that you see at the upper part of your screen. We would install a pipeline along the freeway off-ramp that you see in red on the freeway off-ramp, would lead to this pump that would pump water through the storm drains under the highway and out into the bay. So I'm sorry, I'm getting that backwards. I think this captures water that comes onto Donahue, and we would pump it out under the freeway with the existing culvert. So this is the first step. The second is to create a permanent pump station, number 2 at the top left of your screen, that would allow pumping of water from the pond through that existing culvert. We will add a flood wall along the highway. We'll do some pond dredging. And then finally, in the future with Caltrans, we'll work to build a secondary pipe under the Highway 101 to carry more water. The pond is where everything in Marin County drains, as well as to Donahue. And so our job is to replumb the pond and to also work higher upstream in Marin City in the watershed to capture water higher up in the hills and have it soak into the hillside so it doesn't all converge down here at the bottom. So those are projects that will take the next 5 years or so to complete. We're excited we have the funding to do them. Very quickly, I think everyone knows that we're completing the last segment of the Marin Narrows. Again, the significance in this particular discussion is that this is another major corridor bringing people to work in Marin County because we don't have places that people can afford to live. So it's great to finish this highway, and we also need to build the housing. Similar with the US 101 to Highway 580 improvement project. This is another project to bring people from the East Bay. Thank you, Barbara Rothkrug. I see your question. I'll be glad to answer it when I finish the presentation. Anyway, East Bay people, also many of our teachers and professionals are coming in from the East Bay housing, so we have to make this corridor work better for them as well. Next slide, please. There was a quick mention in the chat of sea level rise coming, and so I want to say that the Transportation Agency is looking at sea level rise, and as many of you know, our counties and cities are looking at sea level rise. TAM's perspective on sea level rise planning is for our transportation network. to look at how rising seas will impact the connectivity of our streets and highways and road network. And so they have retained a team to begin to look at our road network, to look at all of the sea level rise studies that have been done and develop an understanding of the benefits, the challenges, and the issues of addressing sea level rise at different locations. So we're excited that this is going forward. Next slide, please. The countywide transportation, like the county housing element and countywide plan, TAM will undertake the countywide transportation plan for the first time in Marin County. This replaces a congestion management plan, which we used to have, but it will go hand in glove with plans for housing development in the county and in our cities by looking again at our travel corridors and our needs and looking at the future development and figuring out what are strategies to move people around using various ways of mobility. We've just approved a contract to a very skillful team of experts who know Marin County very well and have been working in the county. They will start an outreach effort beginning this fall. They contemplate having 5 community meetings and to garner community input and to develop a very robust county plan that will help us plan for the future to link our transportation and our housing and land use together. Next slide. I'm going to go a little bit higher now in looking at regional planning that impacts and influences our local plans. So Bay Area, Plan Bay Area 2050 was finished up this past year. It sets some parameters for our local planning in Marin County. There will be a limited and focused update to that plan over the next few years, and that effort is kicking off, and there will be community outreach on that. And then Transit 2050 will build on the work of a network management committee that is kicking off this week in MTC to look at transit planning for the future and for the 9 Bay Area counties. I'm part of that committee and I'm excited about this work. Next slide, please. Just a brief mention on the climate change front about electric chargers and fleets. Lots of activity here in the county on the local level, also funding coming from the federal level. A quick sprinkling of the various ways we are raising awareness and providing options to go electric or go hybrid for people that want to do that, and make sure that we have the the fueling network that we need to make this form of mobility practical for everyone. Next slide, please. I'll say briefly that we do have an interchange study project at the Transportation Authority. The significance of this is reuniting our communities that the freeway has bisected and providing linkages for travelers using all modes over our overpasses. So there are 3 overpasses that have been prioritized. They're in the yellow circles, including Tiburon Boulevard, East Blythedale, I believe Manuel T. Freitas Parkway, Civic Center Drive, and then Alameda del Prado and Nave Drive. And they're being studied right now with calls for community input to figure out how we can retrofit these interchanges for greater mobility. I wouldn't be able to give an update on mobility if I didn't talk about my own favorite program, Safe Routes to School. I was active with my own kids in this program, which really trains the next generation of kids to walk and bike, to take active transit. And so we have huge participation in all 58 public schools. We've reached a point where nearly 50% of all of our school trips are green, which can include school buses and carpools and walking to school and remote drop-off areas. But we are raising the next generation of walkers and bikers, and that's always exciting. And then it makes for less traffic for the rest of us during the school congestion periods. So everybody wins with safe routes. I'm gonna skip this only I'll mention the top mobility hub plan launching. This isn't exciting. We just received grant funding to study our mobility hubs at our ferry and rail connections in San Rafael, Sausalito, Larkspur, and Novato, to look again at how do we make these connection points multimodal for all users. So we have funding to study what would it take to connect up transit and bikes and walkers and provide parking for commuters. And finally, Marin Transit recently received a $31.5 million from the Federal Transit Administration for a new electric transit bus facility. We're very excited about that. And the Golden Gate Bridge District is undertaking a strategic planning process right now, and we'll put in the chat how you can provide input to that process. And I think with that, that's my high-level whirlwind housing and transportation in Marin County. And I welcome your questions.
Thank you, Stephanie. That was very enlightening. We have a few questions. Stephanie, how can we assure that ADUs would be for low-income folks and or workforce people on a long-term basis?
Yeah, and you know, this question was asked at the June 22nd panel too, as I recall. And at the moment, there is no way to ensure this. I do not believe that many communities have deed restricted their units. And so it really is up to the individual owners, property owners, to make rents affordable. I think we have some studies that indicate that this often happens. But I wish I could tell you that we could lock this in perpetuity, but I'm not sure that we found a way to do that yet. We may yet.
Okay, thank you. I think one of the challenges in Marin County is that we've got an aging population. And I think, as you mentioned in your presentation, a lot of the aging population are finding it harder and harder to continue to afford to live in Marin. Is there anything that local government, county government can do to help that situation?
Yeah. We are looking at a few solutions, Kevin, and I agree. This is a very serious problem, not only for our seniors, but for our caregivers, for our seniors who are having difficulty here. A couple of things that come to mind that we are doing. We are at the county going to initiate a rent subsidy for qualified low-income seniors to provide a subsidy for those who qualify for monthly rents to help them mitigate the impact of rising rents by offering, again, a subsidy payment on a monthly basis. This is a new program. I don't think it's fully fleshed out, but it is on our list of programs for the housing element that we're considering. The other thing that is not an entirely government solution, but one that we heartily endorse and hope we'll see more use of, is the home match program. I'm going to blank on the new name, but this is a nonprofit agency that is working with cities and towns in Marin to provide home matching services for seniors living in their homes who have an extra bedroom or two to rent to someone, either for actual cash payment or services in lieu of a cash payment. But the wonderful young man, Luke Barnesmore, who manages that, is very good at what he does, and we will look for a link. If we don't get it in the chat this afternoon, we'll put it in a follow-up link for how people can look at home match. So a couple of options.
I want to remind our audience that if you have questions for Stephanie, please put them in the chat and we'll try to get to them as time is available. Stephanie, another issue in Marin is housing for workforce people. Does the county have any specific programs that would help address that issue?
I mentioned the new Oak Hills development that we are a partner in developing for workforce. I can also tell you, Kevin, that we are working with the College of Marin to create workforce housing for the new firefighters who are going through our Fire Foundry program. And it looks like we will be working in concert with College of Marin to provide some workforce housing there. And yes, I'm blanking, and forgive me, but I know that we know that workforce housing is a huge issue and one that we want to be a part of the solution for. So we have set aside $2 million in funding this coming year for workforce housing support subsidy, in addition to some of the other affordable projects that we'll be funding.
That's good to hear. Let's see. Regarding, we had a question about how can we prevent toxins in Marin City from sea rise level?
Yeah, that's a good question. And Marin City, as with other areas, has groundwater, which is pretty close to the surface. There was an old gas station there, an old Chevron or Texaco station there at the current site of the Gateway Shopping Center. It was cleaned up and received the State Water Resources Board sign off for the cleanup a number of years ago. There are some existing hydrocarbon that we know of there, low level, not actionable. The pond also has ambient levels of hydrocarbon, lead, and lead that you would expect to see from a pond adjacent to a major highway. So far, we don't have indications that there's anything beyond this, but the sea level rise will bring the groundwater up with whatever residuals are in the soil, and that will be something we need to address. We're working with Congressman Huffman right now. His office has been extremely helpful in Marin City, looking at all of the infrastructure in Marin City, the storm drain system, the drainage system, the sanitary sewer system, the water system, and with his help, we are making needed upgrades in the Marin City community. And that will be part of the solution to this question.
Thank you. Some people have expressed concerns about the construction of new housing and how it impacts water conservation and the drought situation. Would you care to comment on that?
Sure. As a practicer of conservation, the new home construction, of course, would be done under the current codes and requirements, which require higher levels of concentration across the board. So, it is the case that more development will bring more water use, but honestly, it will not bring the water use that we currently have in the homes that are already here, which are not as efficient, whose gardens are not as efficient, whose plumbing and appliances are not as efficient. So there is a balancing act. I believe resources are finite and we can't go forever. But when new developments go in, that is specifically one of the things we look at is what are the conservation measures and what are the offsets for the new housing that's coming in. So we look at that closely.
We had a question regarding the status of converting the bike lane on the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge to a commute lane during the commute hours.
Yeah, I do think this, has been in demand for a long time. I would like to see something like this happen myself. I also have to say, however, that as we unleash a third lane on Marin County, we are not prepared for the downside impacts of bringing more cars over that bridge all at once. So we need to be mindful of that. What I can tell you is in the plans for the near future, which will release some of the congestion on the Richmond side, which I think is the major thing we're all concerned about. There are plans to, as many of you may know, take down those toll booth plazas. And we're already at, using our transponders for tolls now, but they will actually remove and rework that whole toll plaza in the next 2 years. And the significance of that, it is the congestion and in that toll plaza itself, which contributes to minutes of delay on the Richmond Parkway area. And so we'll see some relief immediately from the changes to that toll plaza. And then we'll continue to look at, can we come up with some movable bike barrier or not? And just what is the right thing to do out there?
I think it's rather ironic that we don't want a lot more cars coming into Marin. However, most of those cars are workers people who work in Marin in service jobs who can't afford housing in Marin. So
Kevin, you're so right. There's the connection with our housing and transportation, and why I decided to talk about both. They're just inextricably linked. If we will build some more housing, the congestion on those highways won't be so as a challenge for the users as it is now.
You mentioned the TAM project, the highway northbound 101 to eastbound 580 connector project. That project could significantly impact the Canal neighborhood. What steps are being taken to include their input in the process?
Yeah, that's an important question. And I do think steps have been taken. I think, frankly, we had a couple of years ago in the planning, we needed to take a step back in the planning and make sure we were more inclusive of the local community. And there are some impacts of some of the options for that connector that could close off the connector at Sir Francis Drake, East Sir Francis Drake, which is problematic for the community. It has such limited access to West San Rafael as it is. So I know that they are going through a process, Kevin. I have not followed that in great detail, but I do know, thanks to Council Member Micah Gulati, that the community's voices were brought to the fore in East San Rafael. Yeah.
Thank you. Can you give us an update on what the county is doing, or what the results have been regarding their homeless, working on the homeless issue?
Sure. We had, as all of you know, we've had a number of encampments in Marin County. Encampments came late to Marin County, but they did come during COVID as people lost jobs and lost the ability to stay in their homes. And we saw more of the encampments. The county and the cities have learned to engage now in a very holistic partnership with each agency playing their part. The cities where the encampments are located being responsible for the sites and their maintenance, the county providing support services, sheriffs, if it happens to be like Binford Road in the unincorporated area, police if it's in the incorporated cities. One of the strategies, though, is to bring more services to these encampments and to get people signed up and assessed on our VI SPDAT system and moved through the continuum of care and into housing. And as I'm sure some of you have known, we've housed, approaching 600 people, if not more, in the last several years. So we have a good track record. Not only do we house them, we keep them housed. But we've got a system now where we really do move people through it very coherently, well, as coherently as possible. But it's an ongoing issue, homelessness, and every day our teams are out there working to make things work for people.
Thank you. Can you talk a little bit about maybe your 3 top goals in terms of transportation and housing related issues? You might have covered some of these in your presentation, but in the next year, for example, what are you personally focusing on in those areas?
Yeah, boy, that's a good question. And with the broad brush that I made this morning, now I gotta get specific for you. Uh, Two things. I'm looking forward to seeing the programs in our countywide transportation, excuse me, countywide plan, our housing element go forward. We're going to be focused on programs to keep people in their homes right now and prevent them from going into homelessness. So tenant protection and tenant support and things that are very much in the dialogue throughout the county in our cities and towns. Renter protections is foremost and close in. So I'm glad we're working on that so that we stem some of the homelessness and otherwise people moving out of the county that we've seen. The transportation plan, the new countywide transportation plan, I'm excited to see that in that we will take a close look at what can we do here. We don't have a very robust road network. We know that. So Marin was not built to handle a lot of cars. So it's really incumbent on us to get creative and figure out what can we do with that and protecting our natural environment as the framework that we operate. So as I learned from my city manager in Mill Valley years ago when I was on the council there, problems can be solved or made better with focus and attention. And we are going to put some focus and attention on our transportation network, and I'm excited about that. I think the third one for me is separate from all this, but it's down in Richardson Bay where we are focused on moving people from boats that are not always seaworthy. In fact, most of them are not. We got a grant from Senator McGuire to create a new state voucher program, which will get people into housing more quickly than the federal voucher program. And we're finding that people on the water are now ready to move into housing on land, and this state voucher program will help them do that. So I'm excited, and that's a priority too, along with restoring the eelgrass habitat down there.
Thank you. How can last question, how can the league be helpful to you and the other supervisors in your efforts regarding these subjects?
Yeah, well, the league does a wonderful job with providing avenues for the community to engage on topics like you're doing today. And you are also great explainers of very complicated material that is difficult for your average community member to work through. So you've been marvelous partners with us in prompting candid seminars and workshops on issues. I think we learn as much as anybody from the seminars that you do and the workshops. So I think just continued engagement, Kevin, as you have with us, you and Ann and the whole team, with us on housing issues, on homelessness, on transportation, on sea level rise, and helping us to promote the respectful dialogue and constructive questions that you always do as well.
Thank you. I don't see any more questions. I want to remind people, if you check the chat area, there's a lot of useful information about contacts, for example, with Home Match and the TAM interchange study. So you can check the chat to get more information on that. So on behalf of the league, Stephanie, I want to thank you and your aide, Jennifer, for all your help in putting this presentation together, and we hope to have you back soon.
Thank you, and I want to give a shout out to TAM's Molly, who is here today with us also, who has been a very big help in putting the presentation. So it was a team effort, and we were glad to do it. Thank you for having us.
Our pleasure, and I'll put in a little plug for Molly Graham, who you just referred to.
Yes.
She's the public outreach person for TAM. She will be one of our guest speakers at the Transportation, Land Use, and Housing Committee meeting tomorrow.
Oh,
so
perfect.
She'll be able to provide a little more detail of some of these things you talked about today.
Great, perfect. You're in good hands.
For anyone who's interested in doing the recording of the webinar that we recently did on planning for housing in Marin, I just put the link in the chat. If you missed it, it's definitely worth watching. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for being with us today and
My pleasure.
keeping us so informed.
Thank you. Thanks for all you do, everyone. We'll see you the next time.
Great.
All right. Bye-bye.
So we're a little ahead of schedule. I think we'll probably end up ending this meeting earlier than normal. But I did want to, before ending the meeting, I did want to acknowledge Max Goal, who I don't think he's here yet. Max he worked as an intern to support our website maintenance and design from April to June of this year. And he was a tremendous worker and most appreciated by the league. Max is leaving he's a Marin College of Marin student, and will be transferring to UC Santa Cruz this fall, and will be majoring in feminist studies.
Thank Max. They were just really enormously helpful to us, and wish them the best. Sorry they aren't here to hear us say nice things about them, but we'll just have to tell them what we said. So anyway, thank you, Max. Thank you, everybody, for being with us today. I don't think, unless anybody has an announcement, if you came in late and have something you want to tell us, I will leave it to you, Kevin.
Okay, well, thank you. And thanks everyone for coming today. We'll be taking, I believe we'll be taking next month off. So there won't be a monthly member meeting next month, but we'll start up again in September, and we'll look forward to seeing you then.